Hey everybody, and welcome back to the internet once again. I wanted to start off today's stories with something strange that happened to me last night. So last night as I'm going to bed, I turn off the light, I lay down in my bed. My cat comes in and she comes up and cuddles with me for about 15 minutes, pretty standard. And as she gets up to walk away, I feel a light sting on my arm. And I'm thinking, okay, that didn't hurt that bad, but it's very unusual for her laying in bed. So I get up and I turn the light on, and there's a freaking wasp in my bed. I don't know how it got there. I guess it must have clinged onto the cat or something and had just been underneath us the whole time. But yeah, it couldn't fly or anything. It was just wiggling around on my bed. So I'm like, okay, it didn't hurt that bad, but that's kind of disgusting. So I go to get a paper towel to pick it up and throw it away. And it stings my finger through the paper towel. Now, I don't know if it was because it was more of a direct sting or if it was just because it was on a more sensitive area, but getting stung in my fingertip hurt like crazy. I haven't been stung by anything since I was a little kid, so I really underestimated how much power those little things have. Anyways, I eventually killed it and threw it in the trash. But man, that adrenaline rush made it hard to get to sleep after that. Anyways, moving on to the Reddit stories for today, starting with Entitled Parents called, "Their names are on them, they own them now. Entitled Mom and Kid steals my video games." So this happened some time ago when I was in elementary school. I had a friend I normally walked home with, so you could say we were pretty close. Anyway, we both decided to go to my place after school that day to have fun with my games. At the time, I and my brother each had a Nintendo DS, so I whipped them out and we start playing. I asked if he wanted anything from the fridge as I was going into the kitchen. He doesn't reply, so on my way back with some food and snacks, I realized that the old buddy of mine is nowhere to be found. I figured he has gotten bored and gone home. He has that kind of behavior. So I proceed to putting the games to charge. I then realized they're gone as well, so I figured he took them. We were buddies, but I had never really given him anything of mine, so them being stolen was a new experience for me. Anyway, I know where he lived at the time, and I decided to go over there the next day since it was the weekend. I get to his place, and a guest of theirs opens up. I immediately see the friend holding my DS in his grubby mitts. I proceed to greet him, and he quickly tucked my game in his pocket. I request that he gives them back so I can leave. As I saw, when the battery is dead or low, a red light blinks incessantly, and as dumb as he was, forgot to steal the chargers, so I proceed to meeting his mom, who was watching TV in the living room. Enter the Entitled Mom. "Hello, Entitled Mom. I came to collect my games back from my friend. He took them from my house without permission yesterday." She says, "What games?" I point to the rectangular bulge in friend's pocket. "Are you talking about the PlayStations I got for my boys?" I was quite lost at this point, as she doesn't know what make they are, and still having such confidence. They aren't PlayStation, they are Nintendos, and they're mine. "Are you calling me a liar? In my own home? I got them for my boys for being such good children." At this point, she was red with rage. "They are well-behaved boys, and they deserve the best." Sorry ma'am, I don't mean to make you mad, but those games are stolen and I want them back, please." She then proceeds to shout obscenities at me, even in front of her guests. I then realize there's no point, so I retreat for now. My parents arrive from work and I tell them the story. My dad goes ballistic. Just how I liked. We march over there and my dad smashes the doorbell. Luckily, Entitled Mom opens up and my dad, being who he is, demands the video games back. She glares at me behind my dad's leg. I'm smiling like the Grinch. She says, "Hello sir, what games are you talking about?" "You know darn well what we're here for. Return them before we call the police." She says, "The PlayStations? I bought them for my angels and no one can take them away from them." I thought to myself at this point, the games are dead for over a day now, so I'm sure they've been laying around for hours. She shouts for her kids to come downstairs. She says, "Show them your Game Boys." They show the games, which had their names scratched all over them. I start sobbing at the horrible sight. She says, "See, the games are theirs. They even have their names on them." Then my dad does the craziest thing after seeing me sob. He snatches the games and destroys them there and then in front of everyone. I was totally shocked. Entitled Mom's eyes widened as she was speechless. My dad then proceeds to taking us back home, and a few days later he got me a new Nintendo's with twice the games I had before the incident. He said he had called Entitled Mom and her family and told them never to interact with us again. Haha, dumb Entitled Mom. That is a strange response coming from the dad. Either they have a lot of money or he just really wanted to teach somebody a lesson, or I don't know. Okay, let's move on to I Don't Work Here Lady called Karen accuses us of favoritism for an employee who isn't ours. So this is more of a story I witnessed or intervened in. I used to work at a grocery store deli. I hated it. Midday one Saturday, it is absolutely mobbed. We are short-staffed and the line is overwhelming, so I'm doing my best to stay calm and focused. It doesn't help that I'm 5 foot and the counter is 4.5 foot. I literally have to wave to customers for them to see I'm there. As I mentioned, there is a line, but a blonde Karen and her 2 offsprings disregarded it entirely. Instead, the 3 of them are doing their darndest to interrupt every customer we beckon to the counter. Her son attempts to commandeer the order I'm currently taking, but I tell him to wait his turn. He steps behind the current customer impatiently. Meanwhile, Karen comes storming over to her son and says, "Oh, they'll help their own employees before they help me." I look over to the hot case and see my coworker helping a lady in a red smock. The store uniform is red polos, and I recognize the customer as a clerk in the shopping mall's thrift store. "Actually," I pipe up, my customer service cadence frayed and snippy, "she doesn't work here. She works at the Christian thrift store across the parking lot. She was waiting before you." Karen jumps back and glares at me. Her son knew I was there, but she obviously didn't. I'm sick of them buzzing around, so I ask her what she wants. She doesn't say anything and storms off, hiding her shame with self-righteous anger in true Karen form. Later, the manager texted me to say she had complained. Joke's on her, I was dating the manager, so we only laughed about it. He also let me get away with throwing a corn dog at a guy in Michael Vick jersey, bless him. I mean, the people in these I don't work here stories must have like really bad eyesight and just think, oh, they're wearing a color. Employees wear that color, they must be employees. Okay, next we have stop telling you when mail is missing? Okay. So I worked as a mailwoman a few years ago for a short period of time, and my boss wasn't much of a boss. All she did was relay messages from her boss to me. On my starting day, she told me several times, "I want to know everything, so if something is wrong, call me immediately." After a few weeks, I started to learn the patterns in the mail. Church magazines this week, tax letters that week, etc. One day I noticed that only half of the addresses I covered were going to receive their tax letters. It was literally streets A through H got them and I through Z didn't. This was obviously incorrect, and I called my boss to warn her something might have gone wrong at the sorting center. Her reply, "It's impossible for something to be wrong there. You are probably just imagining things. Don't bother me with this unimportant stuff." A few days later she called me, "Why didn't you tell me so many letters were missing? It's raining complaints." I told her that I called her, and she denied it, and told me one more mistake like that and I'm fired. I hadn't made any mistakes up to this point. I knew she didn't read her email, that's why I called, but I decided that if she was so intent on blaming me, I could make sure I have evidence. So the next time I noticed stuff was missing that I was supposed to deliver, I mailed her. No response for 4 days, and then I got a scathing email. "Don't email me for unimportant stuff like this. It can't be going wrong at the sorting center. Stop contacting me over every little thing." So I did. I stopped trying to warn her of incoming complaints, and the next week I saw the perfect opportunity for revenge and malicious compliance. So the Christian magazines that were usually delivered to 90% of the addresses had only arrived for 10% of the addresses. Now, an important note, these Christians aren't the nice kind, they're the holier-than-thou kind, and they needed their magazines on time or all hell breaks loose. I once delivered them an hour later than usual due to heavy workload, and they called my boss's boss to complain. I knew they would be absolutely livid if they didn't get their magazines, but my boss told me not to contact them over missing mail, so I didn't. Judging by her angry phone call that evening, her boss had already ripped her a new one, and she was planning on doing the same to me. I just told her, "I have an email from you telling me not to warn you about missing mail, so what did you expect?" She tried to yell at me, but I was already done at that point, so I just yelled over her, "I quit because of your lousy work ethics, and I will hand in my stuff on Monday." Fun fact about my contract, the company wanted to be able to fire mailmen at any moment, so we also got to quit at any moment, with no notice. She was pissed. This was one of the first times I stood up for myself, and it felt awesome. The job only paid like $100 per month, it wasn't many hours, so I really didn't care about losing that income in exchange for not having to deal with that boss again. See, this is something that I kind of love about just following orders. Whenever you get into a job where you're not paid to think, you're just like, alright, I guess I'll just keep doing what I'm supposed to be doing, I'll just do what the boss tells me, and even though I know things are going to go horribly wrong, it's going to be on them. It's kind of nice to just have that reassurance in yourself. Alright, next story is called Entitled Mommy Gets Herself Arrested, followed by even more Entitled Daddy. So I am under my buddy's car in the driveway. It's a 1973 Olds with a 4-speed, and we're replacing the clutch. We're shade tree mechanics at best, but this car takes me back, so I agreed to help him. He buys good beer, we're inefficient, dirty, and a little bit frustrated. We might possibly have had a few of those beers. Anyway, we're trying to muscle the tranny back in place. A kid of about 8 or so bends over and without preamble launches into his pitch for some overpriced popcorn he's selling for whatever kid cause he was selling it for. I said that we were a little busy at the moment, and he'd have to come back later when I wasn't actually under a car. Entitled Mom comes in and observes that we seem to have time to drink up a case of beer. Why can't we take 5 minutes and buy some popcorn? I literally have a 75-pound Muncie transmission on my chest as we are trying for the 10th time to slide it into place. Lady, I don't even like popcorn, I tell her. No, thank you, and have a nice day. But it's for the children, she says. He doesn't like kids either, my buddy says. I love this guy. Entitled Mom won't take no for an answer. I lose what little patience I have left after transmission wrestling for the last 10 minutes. From my position, laying on my back under the car, I finally holler at her, Lady, get off my property and take your kid with you, now. Wait, did we just finally... Yes, the transmission finally lined up and slid into place. Just as we were about to begin getting the bolts started, the entitled mom launches into a foul-mouthed tirade. I shift my position a bit, and one of my feet brushes against the entitled child. He didn't fall or anything, but he did step back, and in doing so, tripped over one of the tools we had scattered around and landed on his butt. The entitled mom goes crazy and starts kicking me in the legs. I'm not sure whether to crawl further under the car to try to get out, but fortunately my buddy got out of the other side and intervened. But by then, the entitled kid had joined in. My buddy basically crowded them away from me, and I got out from under the car, furious. They retreat to the street, and I picked up the phone and called it in. I have a next-door neighbor who saw the whole thing as well. The entitled mom and kid actually approached them for a quick pitch, and then continued around the cul-de-sac. Police arrive, and we tell them what happened, as does the next-door neighbor. The cops house the lady up, and she goes crazy on them, calls her hubby, and after 5 minutes he shows up. By then she's in cuffs, the kid is in tears, and the dad starts yelling. Oh mercy, he was a few beers into his afternoon, too. Too many to be driving, apparently. Fun times had by all. We finally did get that olds put back together. Hey, you know you're a bad salesman when you can't even make a sales pitch without ending up in cuffs. If anything, these entitled people are best at selling reasons why they should be arrested. Okay, now for the big story, called Today I F'd Up by Taking LSD and Pretending to be French for 10 months. So this was more of an F-up that happened quite a while ago, which only just caught up to me a few weeks ago, so also not today. About 11 months ago, I moved into a new house as a temporary sort of thing until I could get the money together to sort something out properly. I was hoping to have already moved out by this point. On my second day after I'd finished unpacking, I decided to break the house in with a nice acid trip. I brought some with me that I'd recently bought but not had the chance to use yet. Things were going well with the trip, but then it seemed to be getting really intense, and I quickly realized that the tabs were much stronger than I had been told they were, and I thought being locked up in an unfamiliar house wasn't helping me relax. So I figured the best thing to do to relax would be to go for a stroll, because I was starting to get pretty overwhelmed at that point. So I left the house to start my walk, and my next door neighbor happened to be just arriving at the same time. It's a street of tightly packed terraced houses, so next door's door is about 1 meter away from mine. I had not met anyone on my street yet and didn't realize this was a friendly, tight-knit community where people talk to each other. She said something along the lines of, "Hello, nice to meet you. My name is blank. Are you new to the area?" So basically I do this thing sometimes when people try to sell me things on the street, etc., where I pretend I can't speak English. I remember a few words from my GCSE French, so I just say some nonsense sentence, and then people usually leave me alone. In the state I was in, this conversation seemed like it would be way too intense for me, and French just sort of came to me as my default response to the situation. My exact words were, "Je voudrais une boulangerie," one of my favorite lines to use, and I shrugged my shoulders a bit with a weak smile. She pretty much just let me to it after that, and I got on my way. I did my walk and got home about 2 hours later. I was tripping majorly, so the walk ended up taking a lot longer than it needed to. When I got home though, my next door neighbor was stood in her doorway talking to another neighbor who was stood outside. I tried to keep my head down because I couldn't handle any more human interaction, but she waved at me and said, "Bonjour," so I instinctively returned the bonjour and got inside my house as fast as possible. When I got in, I started freaking out straight away because I realized that I'd just become French, and now 2 of the neighbors think I can't speak any English. The next day when I woke up, I realized the best thing I could do, as an Englishman, was just to live the lie for the rest of my short stay in that house to avoid excruciating embarrassment of having pretended to be French for seemingly no reason. Fast forward 10 months, I still live here, and at this point I'm in deep. My life on this street is a web of lies. I perfected my French accent, and over the course of 10 months, French me has learnt a decent amount of English, so he can hold a disjointed conversation. I'd gotten to know the neighbors pretty well, and I was the nice, quirky French guy on the street. I didn't let the lie slip ever, because every day and every conversation I had just meant that it would be even worse if anyone ever discovered I wasn't French. If I had friends come over, I don't have many, so it wasn't too bad. They knew to never speak to any of the neighbors because of my strange situation. Most of them found it amusing, at least. Things were going okay, and I wasn't too worried about being exposed anymore because I'd gotten so used to it. I'm not home that much, and when I am, I rarely leave the house for any reason. So I only had to do it for maybe 5 minutes a day when I was out on my street. If anything, it was a nice way to spice up my day when I got to take on my French persona. French me somehow had much better social skills than the real me, even if his English was a bit limited. But then there was a day it all came crashing down. I was walking to my car and saw one of the neighbors coming towards me from the opposite direction, with someone else next to her I didn't recognize. She stopped to say hi, as she normally does. And then she says to her friend, "This is my friend, the guy I was telling you about." You might be able to see where this is going. His friend hits me with a question in French that I didn't understand a word of, and I knew he was actually French straight away because his accent was way better than mine. I didn't know what to do and I just froze. Every second that went past just made it so much more painful, and after way too long of a pause, I just decided I had to come clean. I told her I wasn't actually French and I couldn't speak French, and then I tried to play it off like some kind of practical joke I'd been doing on everyone. Nobody was buying that. I walked straight to my car and then let the embarrassment just swallow me for a while. I haven't spoken to any of my neighbors since, some of which I'd struck up a friendly conversation with over those 10 months. I make sure nobody is around now whenever I leave the house, and I do a loop around the block in my car if any of my neighbors are walking down the street when I get home, so that I never have to come into contact with them. Every time I think about the day I was discovered, the embarrassment physically hurts me. Oh, that painful feel when everyone finds out you're not actually French. Such a big disappointment. Well, that story leads perfectly into the question of the day called, "What's the most awkward situation you've ever been in?" But again, it looks like this video's been going on too long, so I'm going to be making a separate video for this later tonight. So go ahead and subscribe if you want to stick around and hear the responses. Thanks for watching, and I will talk to you guys later.